Hello, Fort Belvoir. Welcome to Belvoir in the Know, the only podcast created especially for the Fort Belvoir community to help you stay in the know and on the go. I'm Command Sergeant Major Greg Kleinholz, the Garrison Command Sergeant Major.
And I'm Colonel Josh Seagraves, the Garrison Commander. Sergeant Major, throughout the month of June, we've been recognizing Safety Month. And we began the month with the part one of our safety podcast featuring our Fort Belvoir Installation Safety Officer, Miss Bridget Pilgrim, where we discuss safety tips and information to help us safely navigate through the critical 101 days of summer. So today we're going to continue that discussion and speak to the newest industrial hygienist, Melvin Bolden, to discuss his new role, prior experience, and most importantly, his goals to create a safer environment for soldiers, their families, and civilians here on Fort Belvoir. So Melvin, welcome to Belvoir in the Know.
Thank you for having me.
Glad you could make it today. So for our listeners who are not familiar with the role of an industrial hygienist, can you give us a simplified definition of exactly what industrial hygiene is?
Sure, sir. Think of an IH as a scientific detective. We protect the health and safety of workers and the public. Primarily, we work in the workplace, and we anticipate, recognize, evaluate, and place controls on hazards. So that could be anything from physical, biological, chemical, or radiological.
Interesting. So normally on these podcasts, we like to start out by getting to know a little bit about our guests. With that, could you just start by sharing a little known fact about yourself that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yes, I'm a avid slow biker. I've biked probably in about 10 different countries, about 3 different continents, and I've toured biking between 75 and 100-mile stretches before.
Wow, that's great. Not only great for just general physical fitness, but great way to see other countries as well.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role here on post?
Sure. I'm from the DMV area. I'm a degree chemist. I have about 17 years of experience as a scientist, 6 of which was an environmental chemist. And for the last 9 years, I've been practicing industrial hygiene. I've acquired certifications in a number of different inspection, sampling, and analytical methods, and that ranges anywhere from lead, mold, air, water, and soil, just name a few. As a matter of fact, I've even taken home inspection courses and completed that a few years ago.
Yeah, wow. Melvin, that's great. That's really going to help us here on Fort Belvoir. As we know, you've had a vast career and a lot of experience with different agencies working in your field. In your previous position, you worked for 7 years as an extractionist and an analyst of water and soil samples. What led you to deciding to work for the Army?
Like I said before, my degree is in chemistry, and a lot of people that major in those hard sciences generally go to medical school or dental school. But I've always been interested in the outdoors as a kid growing up in the country, and I've always had an affinity towards environmental science. And then once I got to college, I quickly fell in love with chemistry. And at the time of the graduation, Army was one of the only entities that could actually allow me to practice my disciplines and grow as a scientist. So I came to the Army.
Nice. You mentioned a handful of sort of degrees and certifications that you've achieved, which very impressive. And obviously, when we're talking about things that are in the industrial hygienist lane, anytime you can base those decisions and methods on facts, that's really what we're after, particularly from someone who's trained in those facts. So I've got a couple of questions here. The first one really is, how do you plan to use that expertise to support the garrison?
Well, sir, on post, and my duty to Army is what it's always been. I'm here to protect the warfighter and the warfighter's family. And the garrison brought me here specifically for the Fort Belvoir Housing Project, and I plan on bringing as much science-based advocacy as possible to the Fort Belvoir community and yourself at the garrison. As far as how I plan on either myself or someone from my team is going to be involved in every level of the inspection process. So I would like to emphasize again that we anticipate, we recognize, and evaluate and place controls on those hazards. So moving forward, that's what we plan on doing.
Good. That was a good rundown. So a couple of follow-ups with respect to the community and controlling hazards that you mentioned. So obviously the goal is to maintain a safe environment, not only for the community, but also, we know when you think about the Belvoir community that really starts with mitigating and controlling hazards in the home. What are some of the common hazards that we should be aware of? And then after that, just like, are you seeing any trends so far?
Well, I'll say this. If you're not familiar with this area, we're not only known for crabs, but we're known for very high humidity, very, very, very high humidity. In fact, this area sits in a wetland. I grew up on the Zacchaeus Swamp in southern Maryland. So this area is indicative to humidity. So this is the time of the year. It's very crucial. It's first, you want to make sure the preventive maintenance has been conducted on your HVAC system. And this is within the home. Secondly, I would make sure the filters in your home have been changed, and that should be done seasonally, if not more. Third, if there's any standing water or any water intrusion, that should be rectified immediately. That can affect your indoor air quality. Fourth, it might sound small, but if you're taking a shower, you have to turn on the exhaust fan. And that decreases the humidity that the shower might cause. And lastly, also, if you go on vacation, please leave your HVAC system on. Your air constantly needs to be treated to remove any types of indoor air quality impurities, to adjust the humidity, just to name a few things. This is the time I would start to check your carbon monoxide detectors also. They're a silent killer, and you want to make sure that the batteries have been replaced recently. Lastly, one more thing, sir. I would also be aware of, if when you're cooking, the gas range has been cut completely off. Gas is tagged with sulfur. So if you smell eggs or anything like that, I would contact facilities or the fire department.
Yeah, great. My next question was really follow-ups on tips that you could share with our listeners, but I think you just kind of ran through those. So that was a really solid rundown. Thank you.
Yeah, really good. Melvin, when it comes to housing inspection and the process, let's talk about where you fit in. Are you a part of the initial inspection process, or are you a part of the quality assurance team? How do you fit in?
Well, sir, we're a part of all aspects of the inspection process. We identify it, and we make recommendations and provide guidance to the level of contamination. So we're there at all the processes there. So when we conduct our inspection, we monitor the humidity of the house, we monitor the temperature of the home, we monitor if there's been any, we check to see if there's any moisture, excessive moisture, maybe under the sink, when your angle valves are, or behind your toilet. So we do a complete run through of the house as far as checking to see if there's any potential for poor air quality. We're looking at your HVAC systems. We're looking at your filters. We're looking at everything.
Yeah, that's a great rundown on some inspection items that you look for, and thanks for those details. Are there any trends that you were seeing on Fort Belvoir?
Like I mentioned earlier, I think that this is the time that preventive maintenance is key. If you have the opportunity to have preventive maintenance done on your HVAC system, don't turn them away. Have that maintenance done. Like I said, also make sure that the air filters change seasonally. It's not uncommon that they stay in if you happen to forget. So I would just make sure that the preventive maintenance is done.
Yeah, that's really good. I know the partners also have a filter replacement plan in place as well. So that's good. So here's your chance to dispel any myths and clear up any false information. What are some common misconceptions or questions that you get from people regarding mold, air quality, or other home hazards?
A common misconception is that if you suspect mold, that the tenant should either swab or sample it for yourself. Now, I do not recommend that. Swabbing or collecting samples of any sort, it should be left to a trained professional. And time and accuracy is probably two of the most important points of this situation. And the thing is with mold, once you see it, you got to get it out of there. There are a lot of variables that swabbing introduces, or it doesn't take into account. So did you know that if you collect a sample and if it's too cold, it can actually kill the mold colony off? Or if you collect a sample and it's too warm, it can actually multiply the mold colony. There's a lot of things that goes on with collecting your own samples that should be left to a qualified personnel. Not to mention that once the sample has been collected, there's a chain of custody involved. You don't know the accreditation of the lab. You don't know if the lab is reputable. There's a lot of things that goes on to collecting samples. And take from me, I've been doing this for almost 20 years. It's just not something that you just go in and do it half-heartedly. It's something that we get trained in, and something that should be left to the professionals.
No, those are some really good tips and a really good rundown on the actual process of not only collection, but safe handling and then further testing. Thanks for that insight.
And so I will add on one more thing. There are a lot of home remedies to disinfect potential mold. And if it's small enough, and if you don't mind cleaning up yourself, you can use vinegar on the affected area. Can disinfect it. Baking soda dissolved, a quarter teaspoon of baking soda dissolved in water can disinfect the area. Even lemon juice, 3 to 5 lemons on the affected area can disinfect potential biological growth. Actually, even essential oils like tea tree oil, that's a natural fungicide. So a lot of things that you could do if it's a small amount of contaminated area and you feel comfortable removing it, to remove it yourself.
Thanks for those tips. That's awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, Melvin, I think you brought up several very important issues or just several very important topics during that while you answered that question. And one of the things that you said that I think is really important is your experience. So, you've been doing this for 20 years, and one of the most important things you talked about is chain of custody for sampling and then control of those samples. That's like a critical part of determining what the actual growth is.
Yeah, absolutely right, sir.
Yeah, so I think that's a critical part of that, and that's what you and our other industrial hygienists have in common is you have that experience, you understand the necessity and the consistency involved in the methods for doing those sampling and making sure that we get consistent samples.
Yes, sir.
and consistent processes as we move through our homes and other areas of the garrison. So great points. Very insightful and valuable and useful information. If listeners and residents have questions about potential hazards in their home, how do they reach you?
Well, the best way to get me out to your home or a member of my team out to your home is to contact the ombudsman. That's Jen Hudson, and the contact the housing hotline. Now, the phone number here is 571-259-9867. And that's 571-259-9867. That's the housing hotline. So if you have any issues or any suspicions, you smell something funny, you see something funny, give us a call and we'll start to evaluate the affected area.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. I think the main thing is the garrison has resources in place to support the residents if there's a question. That's really kind of the main takeaway. And then just in terms of social media, I don't know if we've got very many questions yet, but I'm sure we will after this. So there's a hashtag AskYourIH. So everybody should share their questions at that hashtag on the Fort Belvoir social media sites. And then also, as you mentioned, call the ombudsman to report concerns, and then we can provide additional information on the housing portal. So we've got several avenues to address any issues that people may have.
Yes, sir.
Wow, Melvin, thank you. This was very helpful, very informative, and again, it's based in your experience in science and fact, and that's really beneficial to the garrison. It's really beneficial to the Army, and we're glad you're on the team.
Yes, sir.
I think that about wraps it up for today. We've come to the end of another podcast. Any final thoughts, Sergeant Major?
Yes, sir. We have a great team here, and all our industrial hygienists, work diligently throughout the days and weeks to support the garrison, to support the families. So if things do come up, just know that to the families that the garrison staff is here to be an advocate, whether through the IH or through the ombudsman to support you and your situation. So thanks, Melvin, for joining us today and providing your keen insights, as an industrial hygienist on Fort Belvoir.
Thank you again for having me.
Absolutely. Melvin, thanks for joining us today. So for everybody out there listening, just remember a couple of final things. Don't forget to download the digital Garrison app and make Fort Belvoir your installation of choice. Connect with us on our website and our Facebook page for all things Belvoir. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Use the hashtag AskYourIH. Continue to wash your hands, wear a mask, and watch your distance where appropriate, particularly if you're not vaccinated. And finally, thanks for joining us. From me to you, Fort Belvoir, now you know.